Have you ever wondered how it all began? Not in scientific terms, but in the absolute silence, before time existed. Before anything existed, before light, time, stars, or matter, there was only one presence, an eternal, infinite, living consciousness. And then, God spoke. The voice of God echoed through the darkness of nothingness, and all of creation responded. This is the beginning of everything. It's not a metaphor. It's not ancient poetry. It's the account of the origin of everything found in the book of Genesis. And today we're going to dive deep into that very first moment in the history of the universe, where everything began with a single word. And God said, "Let there be light." With that sentence, time began to flow. Matter took shape. Darkness was separated from light. What was once chaos became order. What was once empty gained purpose. And this didn't happen through random explosions, but through direction, through intention, and through absolute power. In this video, we're going to explore the creative power of God's Word, a force that doesn't just communicate, but transforms reality. It is a voice that doesn't just speak, it brings things into existence. When God speaks, the universe responds. Chaos submits. Emptiness obeys. And God said, in the book of Genesis, there is more than a command. There are profound revelations of the Creator's character. A voice that commands with precision, shapes with beauty, and establishes with sovereignty. Nothing was left to chance. The world was not born by accident, but by design, an intentional, perfect plan full of meaning and purpose. And all of this has direct implications for your life today, because the same voice that created the universe still speaks. And when God speaks, the impossible bends, darkness retreats, creation bows, and the human heart is transformed. But the truth about this origin has been forgotten, distorted, silenced. The modern world tries to replace the glory of the Creator with the glory of creation. It wants to erase the "and God said" and replace it with hollow, soulless theories. But truth still endures. And in this message, you're going to rediscover the power of that voice and how it still shapes the destiny of humanity. Are you ready to hear the voice that brought the universe into existence? Then stay with me until the end, because this story is also yours. Like the video, share it with someone, and comment, "Do you believe everything began with a word?" Subscribe to the channel for more biblical revelations the world tries to hide. And turn on the bell, because truth still echoes, and those who have ears, listen. In the beginning there was absolutely nothing. No light, no sound, no shape, only absolute emptiness, a silence so deep it felt eternal. There was no time flowing, no matter in motion, only a pure state of non-existence, without direction, without limits, without color. The universe had not yet been carved out, and no life had yet been formed. And yet, God was already there. Hovering over the waters of the deep, the Spirit of God, eternal, invisible, sovereign, moved with intention. Darkness was no threat to him, for all light proceeds from him. It was as if the Creator watched the inert and silent chaos with the certainty that something magnificent was about to be revealed. That moment, suspended in eternity, would mark the beginning of everything we now know. And then, suddenly, the voice of God echoed. Not a voice like that of men, but a direct expression of the Almighty's creative authority. "Let there be light." These words cut through the abyss like lightning through the densest darkness. It was not a suggestion nor a process. It was an absolute declaration charged with power, a command so pure that reality itself had no choice but to obey. Light was born. It emerged where not even the concept of brightness had existed before. It was an immediate response to the divine sound, as if the inert universe had awakened with a gasp of awe. Light burst forth in its original purity, and the darkness, which had reigned in absolute dominion, was separated and placed in its rightful place. It did not disappear, but began to exist under the authority of the Creator. This separation was more than physical. It was symbolic. It was the first division between what is revealed and what remains hidden. Light represented revelation, order, the beginning of communication between the Creator and His creation. Darkness was now given boundaries. And there, in the first instant of time, God established that everything He would create from that moment on would be governed by the distinction between light and darkness, between clarity and mystery, between the visible and the veiled. It was the birth of something glorious. When God called the light day and the darkness night, He wasn't merely naming natural phenomena. He was establishing a spiritual code, an existential rhythm that would govern all creation from that point forward. This division was more than physical. It was a declaration of meaning, a way to show that creation would not be ruled by chance, but by a purposeful pattern rich in significance. Day, with its light, would represent the revealing of God, the time to act, to see, to understand. Night, shrouded in shadow, would symbolize mystery, rest, the quiet preparation for what is to come. It was as if, in the very first moment of creation, God was already teaching that life would be made of cycles: clarity and pause, action and waiting, revelation and faith. Thus, on the first day, God did more than bring the physical world into existence. He established the rhythm of existence itself. The alternation between light and darkness would not be just. It's not just a matter of time. It's a spiritual message that continues, that every night precedes a new day, and that revelation will always come to those who remain in faithful waiting. And with that gesture, God initiated an extraordinary process of transformation, something no human mind could fully comprehend. With a single spoken command, chaos was reorganized, nothingness was shaped into purpose, and creation, once non-existent, was given direction, destiny, and meaning. This was not just the beginning of a new cosmic cycle. It was the first chapter of a sacred story, one that would span millennia and reach all the way to us. It was the opening moment of a divine plan that would shape time, matter, spirit, and the very essence of humanity. The universe had just received its rhythm, and the story of mankind its prologue. On the second day of creation, the divine work continued, and once again, the voice of God pierced the primordial silence with unquestionable authority. After separating light from darkness and establishing the cycle of day and night, the Creator turned his gaze to the formless void still engulfed in a vast expanse of waters. Darkness had given way to light, but now space itself needed structure. It was time to prepare the heavens and the earth for what was to come. Imagine for a moment the initial state of creation. The earth submerged, enveloped in a kind of liquid chaos, where there was no direction, no defined height or depth. And then once again God spoke. And through his word, something marvelous and absolutely essential was formed: the firmament. Called heavens in Scripture, the firmament was created as a kind of dome or expanse, something to separate the waters above from the waters below. Modern science interprets this as the formation of the Earth's atmosphere, the invisible structure that allows life to exist as we know it. But in the spiritual language of creation, the firmament was much more than that. It was the first organizational structure of the world, a sign that God was shaping chaos into a habitable home. The waters above were lifted and suspended, becoming clouds, atmospheric moisture, and perhaps, in the ancient model of the cosmos, even celestial reservoirs. The waters below, in turn, would be prepared to form seas, lakes, and rivers, the cradles of aquatic life and the future stages of great human history. The firmament was called heaven, but not only in the astronomical sense. It was also a space in between, a place of transition and communication between the Creator and his creation. In the spiritual realm, heaven represented the height of glory, the manifestation of God's sovereignty above the earth. And in the physical realm, it was the protective and regulatory barrier essential to sustaining the balance of life. Thus, the second day was not merely an act of separation. It was a demonstration that God not only creates, he organizes. He separates, places, and structures. Every detail of creation points to an intentional, meticulous, and perfect design. And it is in this heaven, established on the second day, that clouds would form, that rain would be controlled, and where one day the very Son of God would be seen returning in glory. Imagine the impact of that act of creation. Before the firmament, the universe was a primordial ocean of overlapping waters, a fluid mass without form, without height, without depth. There was no direction, no balance, no space for distinction. Everything was blended together in a state of chaotic uniformity, where heaven and earth had yet to be distinguished, as if creation itself were waiting, in silence, for a command to give meaning to it all. And then God created the firmament. With this division, not only were the waters separated, the possibility of life was inaugurated. From that moment on, the space between the waters took on a fundamental role: to protect, sustain, and prepare the world for the next great step. There, God created Earth's atmosphere, the invisible yet vital layer that would make possible what no other planet possesses: the breath of life. It was in that sacred space, between the waters above and the waters below, that God shaped the air that one day would be inhaled by men, animals, and plants. The firmament was not merely a physical phenomenon, it was a sign of divine order taking tangible form, a silent testimony that the Creator was preparing a habitable place for His children. The sky, now stretched out like a deep blue mantle, became not just a covering, but a space of beauty, vastness, and expectation. A stage suspended between the visible and the invisible. A majestic backdrop where later the light of the sun and stars would dance, where birds would soar through the winds, and where human eyes would learn to look upward, with both reason and faith. This was the second day of creation. A moment when the chaos of endless waters began to yield to the structure of an ordered, breathable, carefully designed world. A moment when heaven touched the earth and God, in perfection, drew the boundaries of the space where life would flourish. On the third day, something extraordinary happened. A dramatic advancement in the divine plan of creation. The Spirit of the Creator, who had hovered over the waters in the beginning, now turned His focus to the world still covered by a vast liquid expanse. The waters dominated everything. There was no solid ground, no clear division between the sky created the day before and the watery mass covering the earth. It was time to reveal what was hidden. Once again God spoke. His word resounded with unquestionable authority over nature. Let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let dry land appear. And immediately, as if creation itself recognized the voice of its Lord, the waters began to move. They pulled back, obediently, flowing with divine precision. Oceans were defined. Seas separated. Deep basins were carved by an invisible command. And then, for the first time, the earth showed its face. Dry land emerged, revealing continents, plains, valleys, and mountains, as if a masterpiece were being unveiled before the eyes of eternity. It was a virgin landscape, pure, ready to receive life, and full of promises still hidden beneath its surface. But God did not stop there. Upon that newly revealed land, He declared new life. The Creator commanded the earth to bring forth vegetation, soft grasses, fragrant herbs, seed-bearing plants, and fruit trees of every size and shape. And so, from what had been dry land, sprang forth an explosion of green, of color, fragrance, and texture. Silence gave way to the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. The once barren landscape was now dressed in life. Trees rose like natural pillars adorned with ripe fruits. Valleys became gardens and mountains became thrones of beauty. The earth was clothed like a mantle, a living carpet woven by divine command. It was as if creation itself rejoiced in this new step, becoming the stage for the story of life that was about to unfold. Each plant, each seed, each fruit carried within itself the code of continuity, a sign that the world was not created merely to exist, but to multiply, to bear fruit, to blossom. It was not just a visual spectacle. What unfolded before the newly formed universe was the inauguration of abundance, the visible manifestation of a God who not only creates, but provides with generosity and perfection. The vegetation that covered the earth was not random, nor merely decorative. It was functional, cyclical, balanced. God was creating the sustenance of creation, the food that would nourish all future forms of life. Every plant, every fruit, every seed that sprouted from the ground carried a divine purpose. Some would give shade. Others would adorn the fields. Still others would nourish generations with their nutrients. Everything had been thought out, planned, and shaped with precision. And in every detail, God embedded a system of continuity, the cycle of life. The fruit-bearing trees produced seeds according to their kind. It was the first demonstration of biological order, and also of the faithfulness of the processes designed by God. No seed would produce by chance. Everything would reproduce according to its type. From the beginning, God established boundaries, identity, and diversity with balance. There would be no confusion among the species, no chaos in growth. The plant world was programmed to be stable, fertile, and self-renewing. This was not merely the emergence of nature as we know it. It was the first visible sign of life on Earth. The planet, which had once been a dry and silent mass, now began to pulse with energy. Creation, which had until then been shaped into structure, now received life. Life that grows, that breathes, that blossoms. The surface of the world began to transform daily, colors emerging, fragrances spreading, textures taking shape. It was as if the earth were awakening, preparing with reverence to receive the presence of living beings. And God saw that it was good. That phrase is not merely a statement. It is a divine celebration. It is the Creator looking upon His work and acknowledging that what He made carried beauty, order, and purpose. A new chapter of existence had been written. A chapter that clearly revealed not only God's absolute power but also His goodness. His intention to create not just a functional environment, but a fertile, beautiful, and abundant home for the beings yet to be formed. And then came the fourth day, a moment of brilliance, precision, and purpose in the narrative of creation. The earth was already covered with vegetation. The firmament had been established. The seas knew their boundaries. The atmosphere was in balance. But something was still missing. Time markers, directional references, visible signs that would govern the rhythms of life. It was time to enrich the heavens with purpose and beauty. Once again God spoke, and with His creative word, the firmament lit up with celestial bodies of unmatched splendor. He created the great lights, the sun to govern the day, the moon to govern the night, and the stars to adorn the skies and serve as signs for seasons, days, and years. High above the heavens, the sun ignited with majesty, a colossal fire suspended millions of kilometers away, yet calibrated with absolute precision. The distance was no accident, it was intentional. Its energy measured with exact intensity, to warm without consuming, to illuminate without blinding, to sustain without destroying. The sun was not merely a source of light, it was made a symbol of strength, consistency, and daily renewal. Each morning, it would rise in the east as a living promise of continuity, as if God silently were saying, I am still in control. The cycle goes on. But its purpose went beyond radiance. The sun became the ruler of time. It marked the beginning of days, the schedule of life, the rhythm of seasons. Its journey from east to west traced the invisible tempo that would guide sowing, harvesting, resting, and working. It was as if God had hung an eternal clock in the sky, a reminder that time, though unseen, was being measured by His hand. Creation, until then structured in form and function, now gained direction and chronological order. Time was no longer abstract. It became something perceived, counted, organized. The sky was no longer just vast, now it was governed. And when the sun retreated beyond the horizon, ending its majestic journey across the sky, another spectacle took shape. It was as if creation, in silent reverence, prepared for a second act. The moon appeared with softness, serene, silver, reflecting a gentle light upon the slumbering earth. If the sun reigned with strength and heat, the moon reigned with peace and reflection. Its light, though not its own, carried the gift of calming the world, of announcing rest, of reminding us that even in the absence of direct light, the presence of God still reflected upon creation. Around the moon, countless stars twinkled, like fine jewels embedded in the dark fabric of the firmament. They were thousands, millions, spread out with precision, not scattered by chance but positioned with intention. These stars were not placed in the sky merely for beauty. They had purpose and message. God set them as visible signs, to mark time, seasons, days, and years. They would serve to guide sailors, to lead ancient peoples across deserts and oceans. They would remind mankind to look upward, not only to locate themselves geographically but spiritually. With these celestial bodies, God introduced time in its fullness. The universe, once timeless, now pulsed with rhythm. Creation gained defined cycles. The rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, the earth's orbit around the sun, the seasons that would come and go like eternal promises of renewal. It was the beginning of the cosmic dance of creation, a perfect choreography between light and darkness, motion and rest, repetition and wonder. Everything turned under the eyes of the Creator, like a celestial clock operating without flaw, day after day, century after century. And there, beneath this now illuminated sky, the world began to move in cadence. It was no longer a static universe. It was a living cosmos, rhythmic, obedient to an invisible tempo, the tempo of divine will. The celestial order revealed not only a powerful Creator, but a God of precision and balance, a God who shapes the universe not with haste but with perfection. On the fifth day, the world was ready for a new kind of wonder. The firmament stretched its vastness over the earth. The seas were defined, and the vegetation covered the continents with silent life. But the scene, though beautiful, was still quiet. The sea did not sing. The sky did not yet vibrate. There was no sound, no movement, no breath. Then once again the voice of God echoed, and with it the miracle of life in motion was unleashed. The silence of the waters was broken, and the skies, until then empty, were filled with wings and songs. It was as if creation held its breath, and suddenly burst into living celebration. In the depths of the oceans, fish of every size and shape appeared, swimming in perfectly synchronized schools. They sliced through the water with ease and precision, reflecting sunlight in shimmering scales. Giant whales glided through deep currents, majestic and serene, silent guardians of the marine abyss. Octopuses with dancing tentacles, dolphins leaping with joy, colorful coral blooming like underwater gardens, all emerged with purpose, to fill the seas with life, beauty, and diversity. Each creature was unique, designed with precision and endowed with instinct. No marine animal was left to chance. Even the tiniest plankton, floating invisibly in the currents, was created with intention, feeding ecosystems and fulfilling a role in the balance of life. And in the skies, what had once been mere wind and space now pulsed with the sound of beating wings. The air became a symphony of movement. Birds of every size and color crossed the firmament. Proud eagles soared with authority, watching all with piercing eyes. Swallows danced through the air in arcs, as precise as arrows launched with grace. Parrots, ravens, geese, doves, hawks, a living palette of the Creator's imagination. Each bird flew in freedom, but also with a sense of direction pointing to something greater, the God who not only creates but governs with wisdom. The fifth day revealed a new facet of God's character. His joy in celebrating diversity, his love for lightness, for freedom, for the dance of flight and the fluidity of the ocean. The world was not just functional. It was alive, vibrant, dynamic. And once again God saw that it was good. But God did not merely create these creatures, He blessed them. And that changes everything. For the first time in the entire creation narrative, we hear not just the creative command of God, but a direct blessing spoken over living beings. It was more than a biological instruction. It was a spiritual act of generosity, a release of prosperity flowing directly from the Creator's heart. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. Genesis 1 verse 22. There, above the waves and beneath the skies, God spoke with love, intention, and expectation. It was the beginning of life's proliferation, not just the creation of individuals, but the founding of lineages, ecosystems, entire generations that would populate the world with movement, sound, and color. It was the birth of abundance as a divine principle. This blessing was not abstract. It carried spiritual DNA, of continuity, of adaptation, of growth. The world, which until then had been beautiful and ordered, now became fertile and ever-expanding. The creatures did not merely exist. Now they had a calling to fill, to inhabit, to multiply, to explore the spaces prepared for them. It was a day of quiet celebration, where the sky and sea became sacred stages. A living spectacle unfolded before the eyes of God, without a single human word, but with a language only the Creator understands. The language of life pulsing, growing, obeying, and praising simply by existing. Birds soaring across the sky at dawn. Schools of fish swimming in unison through the depths. Breaths, heartbeats, cycles beginning. Each creature praised the Creator not with words, but with its own existence. The simple act of flying, swimming, or breathing was already an act of worship. In the blessing of the fifth day, we see a God who not only initiates life, but celebrates its continuation. A God who is not content merely to create, but who invests, multiplies, blesses, expands. On the sixth day, creation reached its highest point. Every previous stage had prepared the setting for this moment. The firmament, the seas, the dry land, the vegetation, the celestial bodies, and the creatures of sky and sea. Now, the Creator turned His gaze to the solid ground, and with a new command from His voice, the surface of the earth was filled with land-dwelling life. Once again, the silence was broken by the sound of creation. From the plains, great animals emerged. Fields thundered with the gallop of horses. Valleys echoed with the roar of lions. Bushes rustled with the passing of foxes and wild boars. Serpents slithered quietly among stones. Sheep grazed peacefully in flocks. The diversity was astounding, not only in the variety of forms and sizes, but in the intelligence of each structure, in the precision of movements, in the functionality of instincts. Each animal, from the largest to the smallest, was shaped with intention and purpose. There was no excess, no lack. Everything was balance. The chain of life, even before man had appeared, was already functioning in harmony, interdependence, and beauty. It was as if the world was being tuned by an invisible maestro, preparing for its most sublime note. But something was still missing. The earth was full, the sky illuminated, the sea inhabited, but no creature had yet been made in the image of the Creator. And then God did something he had never done before. He formed the human being not with a simple word, but with his own hands, shaping him from the dust of the earth, and breathed into him the breath of life. Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Genesis 1 verse 26. Male and female. Not like the other living beings. They were not merely animated, they were inspired. Endowed with reason, emotion, consciousness, and spirit. Capable of reflecting justice, loving deeply, discerning between good and evil, creating, managing, and relating to God. And over them God declared a blessing and a mission. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. But not as tyrants. God did not grant dominion as a crown of oppression. It was a sacred charge. Humanity was called to be the guardian of creation, a co-worker with the Creator, the steward of a perfect world. The responsibility was clear: to care, to preserve, to cultivate, to carry forward what God had begun. There, on that day, heaven touched the earth in a unique way. The joining of the physical with the spiritual, the temporal with the eternal, the earth with the heavens. Creation was no longer just beautiful. It was now inhabitable, manageable, and relational. And God saw all that he had made, and declared that it was very good. It was in that moment that purpose became absolutely clear. Humanity was not an accident, nor a cosmic experiment, nor the product of random forces. Man was the pinnacle of a carefully orchestrated creation. Every element formed in the previous days, the light, the dry land, the waters, the celestial bodies, the animals, and the rhythms of time, all converged as solemn preparation for this moment, the birth of humanity. Everything had been shaped to receive them. Every leaf that sprouted, every star that shone, every gust of wind and every drop of sea, all were part of a carefully crafted stage. Human beings were the link between heaven and earth, the only ones capable of inhabiting matter and contemplating the spirit, of walking upon soil and still connecting with the divine. And then God looked upon all he had made, from the universe to the smallest seed, from the brightness of the sun to the silent dance of the tides, from the eagle's flight to the tender touch of the breeze, from the lion's roar to the conscious gaze of man and woman. And behold, it was not merely good, it was very good. Creation breathed in perfect harmony. Every piece was in its place, every creature in its habitat, every element fulfilling its role with precision. It was as if the entire cosmos had entered a state of silent worship, aligned not just in form but in purpose, rhythm, and beauty. This moment sealed something extraordinary. The end of creation was not the end of purpose, it was the beginning of the story. The earth, now vibrant with life, was no longer an empty space or a blank canvas. It was a ready home, a majestic stage where humanity would take its place as protagonist in the greatest story ever told, the story between the Creator and his creation. There, before the greatest gift ever given, conscious, relational, eternal existence, humankind would begin to write its part in the divine plan. And then, on the seventh day, the Creator did something unexpected. He rested, not because he was tired. The God who created galaxies with words and summoned life with a breath does not know fatigue. His rest was not a pause from exhaustion, it was a purposeful act of revelation. He stopped, not to recover strength but to teach something eternal. He blessed time. He sanctified a day among the days. He introduced the concept of sacred pause. The seventh day was not merely the absence of creative work. It was the presence of deep meaning. A day set apart, consecrated, a space and time where man would be invited to remember, reflect, worship. With this gesture, God taught that creation would not be complete without contemplation, that the rhythm of life requires moments of reconnection with the Creator. By stopping, God also gave time its rhythm. After creation came not more creation, but communion. The earth, now filled with life, found its moment of rest, not as an end but as a divine seal of completeness. The Sabbath became an altar in time, where every human being, generation after generation, would be called to remember who created them and why they exist. It is in that rest that the wisdom of the Creator is revealed. Work is blessed, but rest is sacred. The pause is not unproductive. It is intentionally transformative. It is in the silence of contemplation that the soul hears God's voice most clearly. And so, with the seventh day, creation did not merely end, it aligned. It did not simply conclude, it was sealed with purpose. Everything was in its place: the universe, life, man, the mission, and time. The Creator had finished His work, and everything was very good. But this was not a finish line, it was a starting point. Because from that moment on, the story of humanity would begin. And God, though resting from creation, would continue walking among men. The rest of the seventh day was, in truth, a silent invitation, a call to connection with the Creator. Not just a break in time, but an open window between heaven and earth, where man is invited to pause. Not to step away from life, but to find his center within it, God. It was as if God Himself were saying, "Now that all is complete, come and be with me." The seventh day was the first liturgy, the first altar, the first moment of pure worship, not through words but through presence. It taught that no matter how noble work is, no matter how fruitful productivity may be, there is something more sublime: communion. Communion with the One who sustains everything. Thus, creation did not end in an explosion of light or sound, but with silence. A silence full of meaning, full of glory, full of God. It was an ending that felt like a beginning, a rest that revealed the true purpose of existence. Not merely to do, but to be. Not merely to create, but to relate. Not merely to exist, but to belong. And in that sacred silence, God said everything that needed to be said. Without a new word, He revealed an eternal truth. The true meaning of life is not found only in doing, but in being with Him. The story of creation is not merely the record of the universe's beginning. It is the beginning of our identity. It reminds us that we are not scattered dust, not some cosmic statistic among billions of stars. We are the intentional work of a Creator, who knows every cell, every feature, every beat of our heart. You were born with purpose. You were thought of before time. And the God who created the universe is still interested in walking with you. We were shaped with purpose. We are not the product of chance, nor the result of an impersonal cosmic equation. We were formed by the hands of the Creator, with intention, with love, with destiny. Each day of creation reveals not only God's power, but His care, His beauty, and His passion for life. Everything began with the voice of God. He spoke, and the universe responded. Light pierced the darkness. Order overcame chaos. And life appeared, not as an accident, but as part of a perfect plan. Every detail of creation, the brightness of the stars, the breath of the wind, the flow of the waters, the fragrance of flowers, bears the fingerprints of the Creator. They are visible signatures of the invisible. Creation doesn't just function, it worships by existing. And at the height of it all, at the center of the narrative, God placed the human being. Me. Not just to pass through life, but to live in communion with Him. To dwell in creation with respect, responsibility, and reverence. To walk a path that leads back to the Father's heart, guided by purposes greater than we can imagine. We were created for more. Created to know. Created to reflect. Created to belong. This is the true beginning of our story. If this message touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to remember they are not a product of chance, but the intentional work of a God who still speaks. In the next episodes, we will dive into the next chapter of the story. When humankind, though created in the image of God, chooses to walk away from the Creator, and how that decision altered the course of existence. Until then, remain in the peace of the One who formed the heavens, the earth, and your heart. And never forget, you were created with love, shaped with purpose, and called to an eternal destiny.